Morning everybody, here I'm at the bush again. Today I was looking at the story of Jesus' Transfiguration. Now this is one that's this mysterious little Bible story that takes place in the latter part of Jesus' ministry. And he tells the disciples one day, he says, "Truly I say to you that there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." So he promises them that there's going to be this event take place where Jesus is going to be coming in his kingdom before any of these guys die. Now, the next Bible story that's recorded in Matthew 17, is the very next verse, which says that 6 days later Jesus takes with him Peter, James and John, his brother, and leads them up to a high mountain by themselves. So we have this promise that these guys were going to that they were going to see the Son of Man in his kingdom before they die, and then immediately we get this Bible story here in the next verse where it talks about Jesus heading up to a high mountain. So he leads his inner circle, Peter, James and John, up to the top of this mountain to pray. So this is not an unusual event. Jesus prays on mountaintops all the time, and so he takes his inner circle of these three young men of God up with him up the hill to pray. Now the Matthew account, which I'm looking at here from Matthew 17, says that while he was there, he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun and his garments became white as light. Now this is not a normal prayer time that Jesus is having. This is something different and unusual that has taken place. This is likened, if you know your Old Testament, Moses, when he went up the mountain to meet with God, a similar thing happened. His face began to shine, and so much so that the Israelites made him wear a cloth over his face so that they didn't get freaked out by this shining light that was coming out of his face. But something similar is happening to Jesus. It's almost as if heaven comes to earth, and Jesus is transformed from his natural self and overshadowed by the spiritual manifestation of heaven shining a light through him and over him. So his face is shining like the sun, his clothing is as white as light, and there is this supernatural event taking place that is extraordinary. So And while this is happening, now all of a sudden then Moses himself and Elijah, two of the greatest men, the greatest prophets of the Old Testament, appear, and they are talking with Jesus at this time. So Jesus' earthly inner circle is here, and the historical great men are also here in the one place on the one mountaintop at this moment in time. And it's this amazing little story where the Old Testament and the New Testament converge on the mountaintop, and Jesus is here meeting with those who are alive today and those who have gone before, all together on a mountaintop. And it's really interesting what is taking place at this time. Now the Luke account tells us that Jesus is speaking with these great prophets of the Old Testament, Moses and Elijah, and it tells us here they were speaking of his departure, which was going to happen at Jerusalem. So they're speaking about Jesus' crucifixion and his resurrection and all that stuff, and encouraging Jesus to, stay the course, and it's going to be amazing, it's going to be awesome, so just stick with it. But what is so funny in this story is that while all this is going on, his young disciples who are here on earth and are still trying to get their head around the whole heavenly realms and all this kind of stuff, don't know what is going on. And in fact, what is particularly funny about this is it records that all three of the disciples fell asleep while this is happening. Now I suspect that it wasn't actually that they were, thought they just had to lie down and have a rest, but just the presence of God and the peace of God came upon them with such tremendous force that they were just overwhelmed at that time. So they just became very sleepy and ended up falling asleep in the presence of God on this mountaintop. Now, it says this here this is in Luke 9. It mentions that Peter and his companions had been overcome with sleep, but then when they were fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men that were standing with him. So Jesus and the disciples are there. The disciples are waking up from this weird sleepy moment that they're having in God's presence, and they see Moses, they see Elijah, and Moses and Elijah are about to go. They're going to fly away. I don't know how they were leaving, and in their departure they were going to head off, and they'd finished having their talk with Jesus. Now Peter says this hilarious thing. It's so funny. he interrupts this, goodbye talk that Jesus is having with Moses and Elijah and says, "Oh, Master, it's good for us to be here. Let's make 3 tabernacles, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah." And it's so funny. And it's kind of like a kid yanking on, it's like my children, they're yanking on my clothing when I'm talking to somebody important and they're trying to get an ice cream or they're trying to get a lolly or whatever. And it's just like, wait, I'll get to you in a minute. And Jesus is having this really important conversation. He gets interrupted by his young disciples and then Peter has this crazy idea of tents. He wants to put up tents. And it's just so funny. Like, why do you want to put up tents on a mountaintop? But I think what's actually going on here is it's really funny on the one hand, but it points to this thing that happens where we want to preserve the moment. And it's almost as if Peter's wanting this moment, this incredible moment that he's standing in the middle of, he wants it to last. So he wants to at least put up some tents so that Moses and Elijah and Jesus can all stay and we can talk and get to know each other. And it's going to be amazing. It's going to last a longer time. Even though these guys, their moment meeting with Jesus is over and they're going to head off. And I think it's interesting as I look at this because it reminds me of this sense of where, church life can become kind of institutionalized, it becomes traditional and the life of it is maybe not there anymore. But you still have got, a church expression or a religious expression going on, but there's no life left in it. It reminds me of like a fireplace. Like in a fire, like my parents on the farm have got a beautiful open fire. And when your fire is in the open fireplace, it's beautiful and warm and the house is warmed. But then in summertime, you're not using that. And so this fireplace is cold and dark. There's no fire there. And it's almost as if Peter's wanting to preserve this moment and erect some kind of structure around this event that's taken place by trying to make it last longer by putting up some tents. And I wonder sometimes how much church infrastructure is like an empty fireplace. It's like something where the fire of God was once burning, but it's not burning anymore. And so I think the application for us, the challenge for us, is to make sure that the life of God in us is burning brightly all the time, not some historical thing that happened once upon a time. I had a very vivid dream as a young man once that I was driving through this desert place, and as I looked out the window of the car, I saw chimneys in paddocks, like in fields. It was a very dry countryside. There was these chimneys, like a fireplace where there used to be a building, but there's no building there anymore. There's all that's left is the chimney of this, where there used to be a house and where there was once a home and a family and a fireplace that would keep people warm. But all that's left is the chimney. And it reminds me of this idea where they're trying to preserve a moment where something amazing is happening, but yet the fire of God has moved on because, for whatever reason, the people aren't pursuing God the way they used to or whatever. And so you have this sad sense of a church or a personal walk with God that just isn't what it used to be. And it makes me challenge myself that I want to make sure that my life with God is real and on fire and lively and vibrant and all of that, because I don't want my religious expression just to be a shell of what it used to be. I want it to be real and alive today. I want that fire to be burning brightly, not just putting up some tent in memory of what once happened, but for it to be real each day. And I think that's a challenge for all of us, is to make sure our faith is a real living thing, not just some historical event that once took place. Because there is something in our nature that wants to preserve a photograph of what once was, and yet, there's but we're not doing that anymore, So I think that's the challenge, is to be living a life of faith today, not remembering a life of faith from 10 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever. But then the story goes on, and it says that while, so Peter now interrupts, "Oh, Jesus, let's put up some tents." And then as he says that, the Bible says that there was a cloud formed and began overshadowing them. Now, it's not a dark storm cloud. The Matthew account records it as a bright cloud. And so what we're having again, it's imagery from the Old Testament of the presence of God coming in a cloud and comes and overshadows them. I imagine it almost might have been like a fog that kind of completely overwhelms them. And this bright cloud comes. And it says here they were afraid as they entered the cloud. The cloud actually comes and completely surrounds them. And while this bright cloud is surrounding them, a voice comes out of the cloud and says, "This is my son, my chosen one," or the other accounts say, "This is my beloved son. Listen to him." And so Jesus is interrupted by God the Father speaking from this bright cloud, and he confirms who Jesus is. This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him. And so there's this admonition on the disciples that they need to listen to what Jesus has to say, but it also confirms that he really is the Messiah, again, if they needed an additional proof that God the Father actually speaks to them. And in fact, that moment is recorded in 2 Peter. Later in Peter's later years, he records in the book of 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 16, and he remembers this story of how God appeared to them on the holy mountain and confirmed Jesus as the Saviour. So I like this story. It's an interesting story, and the other thing is that in a split second, they open their eyes and all of this is gone. It's all finished. It stops. And they look around and it's just another hilltop. The wind's blowing, the sun's shining, Moses, Elijah are gone. And it's only Jesus there as normal, and Peter, James and John, 4 of them left. And the moment is finished. But they remember what took place. And Jesus actually tells them, look, don't tell anybody about this right now. Tell them after I've risen from the dead, but don't tell them now. And so this moment finishes. And they're scratching their heads thinking, what was that? And so many spiritual events are like that. You have this tremendous move of revival, or a big touch from heaven or something like that takes place for a moment, and then it's over. Not that it's finished, but it's just like that event was there, and you have the rest of your life to remember and think about it and consider what that means and live on the revelation that God spoke to you at that time. But we don't need to build a temple to it. But we do need to live a life reflecting on what God's spoken to us, but also doing the thing that he told us to do. So it's important to go on and fulfill the thing that God has called us to do. So I like the story of the Transfiguration. I think it's really interesting. It's just this, interesting moment when we have the Old and New Testaments coming together, and I like it. So I hope you guys got something from that today, and thanks for watching, and we'll catch up next time. Bye for now.